So let's get rolling. Talk about that game against Grand Canyon. First half, things looked absolutely flawless for the most part. You hold Grand Canyon to 27 points, and that was with them making 6 3-pointers. They tend to average like 6.5 made 3-pointers a game. They made 6 of them, and they still only scored 27 first half points. The Aggies go for, 41 first half points? You're getting, you hit 7 3-pointers yourself if you're the Aggies. You get contributions from Carson Templin, who hit a couple of 3-pointers. Drake Allen hits a couple of 3-pointers, and he goes 14 points in the first half. Zach Keller hits a 3-pointer. It was actually the first game all year in which each of Drake, Zach, and Carson all hit a 3-pointer in the same game. And, Mason only has 4 points, but he has 5 rebounds in that first half. Like, everything was going swimmingly. And then suddenly things looked a lot more dicey by the time you get about midway through the first half.
Yeah, a great start of the half. They hold Grand Canyon scoreless for like 5 minutes in that first half, really separate. Drake Allen is just taking things to another level the way he was playing. But you're right. At halftime, give credit to that Grand Canyon team, making adjustments, attacking the rim, not being intimidated, putting pressure on Utah State. And then it was anybody's game. But then the Aggies did start to separate a little bit more, but they left the door open. Can't hit the free throws, can't hit the automatic stuff.
Drake Allen was the only one who couldn't hit their free throws.
And thank goodness to an MJ Collins 3-pointer, which really kind of sealed the deal for Utah State, because until then, it was still anybody's game. Grand Canyon was still very much alive and in the thick of this. And so, Utah State was predicted to win by 9 or 10 points. So they didn't. So it was like, okay, maybe you underperformed a little bit.
Yeah, I think they fell one spot in KenPom after all was said and done.
Yeah, in today's net, they're down to 26.
Yeah, which is I think it's the same there in KenPom.
You win, but you drop.
Yeah.
But you didn't win by as much as a lot of people suspected. So, they left the door open. They made it closer than it needed to be. But at the end of the day, Utah State still won the game. They beat Grand Canyon. They didn't allow a team to sweep them. Great crowd. Probably the loudest the crowd got was when Drake Allen hit that one free throw late after missing so many before.
Not quite. It got slightly louder at other points,
yes, but still.
That was one of the loudest I've heard for a free throw that occurred before like the final minute.
Yeah, for one of your own guys. Yeah. But still some concerns with some of the ways that this game went on. I do at least appreciate that his coaching staff, they let Zach Keller and Gary Clark have a longer run, even though they may not have been as effective on the court with scoring or rebounding. They gave them opportunities to run and gave them opportunities to be on the court and still have an effect on the game, utilizing their size. And so I was happy to see that from the coaches, that even though Zach, may not have been a real offensive force, or and even Gary Clark didn't score and only had 1 rebound, that they still allowed them to play through that. Like, against a team like Grand Canyon, you need to let your big guys play. And they did. And so even though they don't show up a lot in the box score, they still helped this team in a lot of ways in how they played.
Well, here's the thing that really helped Zach and Gary make sure they stayed on the court. Without looking, how many fouls do you think they combined for?
With Zach Keller and Gary Clark?
Zach Keller and Gary Clark.
I don't want to cheat.
That's what I said. Don't look.
2.
Under.
Really?
1.
Only 1.
Zach, in 34 combined minutes for those 2 players, Zach Keller had 1 foul. Gary didn't have any. Let's see, when was that foul? It was like about 8 minutes left in the second half.
I thought I was crazy for spitting out 2.
Yeah, that was like you probably thought that was low, but it was still too high. Because they didn't foul. Like, Carson kind of just absorbed all the fouls that maybe those guys took. He ends up fouling out of the game, but it didn't even feel like he was necessarily having a game where he was fouling too much. He mostly timed him out to where, like, he plays 20 minutes, He usually plays between 20 and 25. It didn't really impact his minutes played, except for the fact that he missed about the last, I think, 3 or 4 minutes. Excuse me, he missed the last 51 seconds where he had to sit out because he fouled out. So, yeah, not fouling. And I want to talk about the first half because the first half was basically everything you wanted the Aggies to do. Like, there wasn't this, it wasn't like they were covering up and getting away with some of the weaknesses that we were looking at that were potentially dangerous for this game, because he thought, fouling Grand Canyon a lot, like, with the potential matchup problems with Henley and with all of their bigs. And then rebounding, the Aggies over the last, 4 or 5 games have been one of the worst rebounding teams really in the country, you could say, especially on the defensive end. They somewhat made up for it at times with some good offensive rebounding, but still were one of the worst rebounding teams in the country. They'd been dominated in the paint. They allowed teams to live in the paint, draw fouls, and hit layups. And the Aggies had at times struggled with getting to the paint themselves, though that was mostly the San Diego State game. In the first half, they held Grand Canyon to 8 points in the paint. 27 points overall, but 8 points in the paint. I think they were out rebounding him, or the rebounding battle was close at halftime. I think Grand Canyon had 3 offensive rebounds the entire first half, and they didn't foul them really in the first half. The Aggies were called for 5 fouls, didn't even put Grand Canyon in the bonus. They were putting Nevada and San Diego State in the bonus by the under 12 media time.
Yeah, you're right. That was a huge improvement. Only 14 fouls on the day for Utah State.
Yeah.
And just a lot cleaner defensive game. Yes, Carson Templin fouled out. He picked up his 5, but I'll take every one of those.
Yeah, nobody else had more than 2.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there may have been 1 or 2 that were still kind of silly, and you don't need to do that. What he did,
yeah.
But he was being Carson Templin. He was active.
Yeah,
he was trying to make things happen, and he helped his team win. Like, legitimately, he made game-winning plays. Yes, he had maybe a problem here or there with a foul, but generally speaking, with his activity, he helped Utah State win the game.
Yeah, and when you get to the end of the game where Utah State had normally been putting teams in the bonus for 10 minutes, one, they didn't give those free points to Grand Canyon, and heck, that's a good thing because Grand Canyon didn't miss a free throw up until like the last second of the game.
That's right.
They go 12 of 12 to start the game. A team that's decent at free throws, but you had guys that were like 50% free throw shooters going 3 of 3 in the game. Demeril might be in the 70s, but they weren't sending these guys to the line a ton. Remember, they took 33 free throws in the first game. Actually shot kind of poorly in that first game, but you get 33 attempts, and so they got 10 more points. And I think they hit 22 of those, or 22 or 23 of those in the first game.
Yeah, the fouls and the free throws.
Yeah, they
difference between these 2 games was so night and day.
Like they doubled their free throw percentage and had their points on free throws cut in half. Like that's the kind of discipline the Aggies had on defense for the game. So while in the second half, the rebounding kind of fell off. The Aggies got out rebounded in this game 35-27. The points in the paint defense fell off a bit. Grand Canyon had 22 points in the paint in the second half alone, so that brought them up to 30 for the game, pretty much on par with what the Aggies, actually it was exactly what the Aggies did. The Aggies had 30 points in the paint, so did Grand Canyon. So by the end, they kind of evened that out. But the thing that kept the same was the discipline on defense and the fouls, and that's something that, even though for the first 16-ish minutes of the second half, a lot of those things stopped going their way, the points in the paint, all these different things. Grand Canyon starts hitting more shots. They were still able to buckle down, and since they weren't fouling, they were staying disciplined. That's the thing that helped them get those last couple of stops. And that's where they end up selling. That's where they, when you go down 59-58, the way the Aggies are playing on defense the whole game against Nevada or San Diego State, that kind of defense would have lost the game. Pretty much the sole difference being their discipline on defense with fouling. Since they still had that, they still had that discipline. Things could eventually turn their way with that hustle that they had. And it did. Because, they go on a 7-0 run. They don't give up easy, cheap buckets. They don't give up easy, free throws up until the very end. And then finally luck turned their way. Because, if Grand Canyon had been in the double bonus when Usu Anane misses the front end of that 1-and-1, he would have got another free throw.
Right.
As it was, the Aggies were able to get that rebound and then pretty much seal the game from there. That was pretty much the game-losing free throw. But if they were in the double bonus, then they would have been able to, get another point, draw a little bit closer, make things a little bit more iffy in those final seconds.
Yeah, I really liked how Utah State was aggressive. They didn't seem intimidated by Grand Canyon. I was a little surprised with some of the Grand Canyon decisions. Really, they only had a 6-man rotation, really.
Yeah.
They had a pretty healthy team. Yes, some guys got hurt over the course of the game, but Nana Owusu-Anane, he got hurt, but he came back. Wilhelm Breidenbach got hurt. He did not come back.
Yeah, but
he hadn't really played much before that point anyway.
He'd gone through like 3 cycles of subbing in and out for like a minute. He subbed in the first half, played like a minute and a half. Did the same thing later in the first half. Comes in the second half, was probably at the end of his stint anyway, as he'd played 2 minutes. That's as long as he'd played elsewhere. So like
an all-world center, Dennis Evans, only managed 2 minutes on the court.
Yeah, and
who just totally destroyed the Aggies in Phoenix.
Yeah, and the Aggies I think had 2 different plays where they finished around him, like where they couldn't finish around him to save his life, or save their lives. He got 6 blocks.
Well, they got 4 blocks and 2 goaltends. They called them blocks.
They did call a goaltend against. I think it was against Demerol, though. I think he was the one that blocked a shot by I forget who, but it was called a goaltend, rightfully so, because it was the right call. But yeah, Evans, he was -8 when he was on the court. He was, and he played 3 minutes. He got scored by 8 points. They had to sub him out immediately. So yeah, they had 3 guys on their bench who played a collective 8 minutes. And were -9 between all of them. So, like, it was, as you said, a 6-man rotation. They get 6 points off the bench. The Aggies get 30 points off of their bench. And I think that's just where Grand Canyon, they're starting to limit their bench. And the Aggies are not. Like, the Aggies are going as deep as they ever have, playing guys the same minutes they have been all year. And this is where that could begin to perhaps help, because Grand Canyon made that push to come back from down 17 points. They finally get over the hump. The Aggies starters kind of cycle back in, and you get to your closing lineups with 5 minutes left. Grand Canyon will have been playing its closing lineup for about 10 minutes straight at that point.
Right.
The Aggies come in, they have the gas, the fuel to still play good on offense, but more especially play great on defense. Because Grand Canyon just slowed down on defense at the end, where they had been playing good. They left MJ Collins wide open from 3.
Yeah, they totally didn't rotate.
Yeah,
they just didn't seem interested, or just totally lost on it.
Yeah, so
that's why I think that, not to get too far off of this, but that's why I think that Memphis game is really not that big of a deal. Where there was wringing of hands and pulling of hair. That's why Utah State lost at Nevada and at San Diego State, because they didn't have that extra rest day. They didn't have their bye week. Well, the way that this team is built, the way this team is so deep, and the way that they can go through deeper into the bench and more options, Utah State's not leaning on their guys as hard. They haven't been all year. So they can still play hard, but they're not leaning on only 5, maybe 6 guys to do it. Utah State had 9 guys who played, and all of them played double-digit minutes. All of them played significant stretches in this game. So Mason Falslev played the most of anybody with 34 minutes.
Yeah, and in a 5-point game,
Grand
in a
Canyon
crucial
had 3 guys who did more than that.
Yeah, in a crucial game where you're fighting for a Mountain West title and things are getting really tight in the second half.
And it's anybody's game with 4 minutes to go.
Yeah, that's the kind of game where your star is playing 38, 39 minutes. Every, team in the conference, save for probably San Diego State, is playing their top player every single minute of the game. The Aggies' 2 best players barely eclipsed 30 minutes.
Yeah, barely. I mean, MJ Collins had 31 and Mason had 34. As in comparison, Nana Owusu-Anane, who was hurt, but they had to keep playing him, he played 37.
Yeah, that's about the only reason he went off the court, was because he was hurt.
Yeah.
And I think he got 2 fouls in the first half for a minute, or Like he subbed out and in like really quick in the first half.
Yeah, eventually he did get fouled out, so he didn't.
Yeah, he did eventually
finish
foul
the
out.
game,
That was like 6 seconds left though, so he basically didn't miss any time.
Demerol had 32. Makai Williams played for 38. Brian Moore Jr. played for 31. Jaden Henley played 35. Every starter played north of 31 minutes.
Yeah.
And Utah State had 2 guys.
Yeah, 2 guys.
Barely did more than that.
So that really shows the depth. One last point I want to make before we go to break. And if you guys want to chime in on any of these topics, we'll get to those here in a minute when we come out of the break. Text 435-339-0321 for any of your thoughts on today or Saturday's game. The one thing I thought, and I kind of mentioned this on social media during the game, but something I thought was really incredible from Carson Templin, Drake Allen, and really the whole team, because I even saw MJ Collins on a couple of plays, is, with Nevada and San Diego State, Utah State kind of got drunk on their own three-point shooting. And, justifiably so with Nevada, they hit 15 of them. Against San Diego State, it was a little less justifiable, especially after they hit 3 early ones, then they just couldn't stop shooting three-pointers.
Yeah.
Drake Allen, Carson Templin, and Zach Keller all hit three-pointers. They combined for 5 three-pointers like in that first half. Carson, they all end up with 6 by the end of the game, but they hit like 5 three-pointers in the first 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. They, at no point did any of them really try a heat check 3 in that first half. And there was opportunities. Drake could have just launched some. Carson, there were a couple he could have launched. But I think something that must have been an emphasis, or at least they've been thinking about it themselves, and given the fact that all of them are doing this, I think it was an emphasis by the team. It's like, hey, if you've hit a couple of three-pointers, don't just shoot another three-pointer thinking that you're definitely going to make it. Make the right read. If you've hit a couple of three-pointers and you find yourself wide open from 3, yeah, go for it. But Drake and Carson were finding themselves in situations where they could take that heat check. The defense was closing fast. They could have checked it up there and said, hey, I've hit 2, let's go for 3. Like Drake was doing that against Nevada. He went 5 for 5. There's a world where that has value if you were just on a heater.
Yeah.
But instead,
still do it within the frame of the offense.
And within the frame of the offense goes back to Coach Calhoun, play to the next advantage. And that's what they were doing. A three-pointer, a heat check three-pointer was not within, that next advantage mentality. And so they were attacking closeouts. They'd pump fake, then they'd attack a closeout. Drake Allen, Carson Templin, as I said, MJ Collins did this as well in the first half. And they were generating open layups, good shots. And so they didn't just settle for, well, I'm hot from 3, I'm just going to keep jacking three-pointers.
Yeah. They
played to the next advantage, and that's where they scored 41 points and a half against one of the better defenses in the country. It's where they end up, even though they shot kind of poorly in the second half for stretches, 74 points in a game where they had the ball 60 times. 1.23 points per possession. It's 123 offensive rating, which is really good. So the Aggies had a good offensive game because they moved the ball well. They moved themselves with the ball, attacked closeouts, made the right decision. Coach Calhoun talked about making the right decision from the free throw line on down. They were doing that. And so it was really nice to see where for 2 games they were just kind of high on three-pointers. And the Aggies have been shooting incredibly well from 3. There is a reason they should be shooting three-pointers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's taking the right ones at the right time and then taking advantage of the defense when they're suddenly trying to stop you when you're hot from 3. Because, you had guys who were running like me after an ice cream truck when they see Carson Templin on the three-point line. And if they're running like that, Carson better be closing out that, even though he's not necessarily a put the ball in the net kind of guy, yeah, you closed out the man who's rushing that hard at you to block your three-pointer. Drake Allen the same way. He's a guy who can really get going downhill. We saw that in a couple of different ways. So that's where you can see guys evolving to be like, hey, there's a smarter way to play, even though you're good three-point shooters. Recognize what are the better shots, because a contested three-pointer versus a drive to the lane, one of those is objectively better. And it's not the contested three-pointer.
uncontested 3-pointers are also nice.
Uncontested, like I said, if
But
they
Drake
were
Allen,
if they were uncontested, like
turnover where he's like, should I take the 3? No, maybe I'll drive. And he's like, turnover.
Yeah, he should have shot that 3-pointer
Just
at the
shoot
end.
it.
But like, Drake Allen, like those early 3-point shots, they left him open. They went under the screen and said, scouting report says let the guy who shoots 20% from 3 shoot the 3-pointer. And Drake was like, all right, bet. Bang, there's 2 of them. Yeah, hit those. And Carson Templin, when you're wide open and they sag 10 feet off of you, you hit that 3-pointer.
Take the shot.
But when you've made 1 or 2, instead of taking that heat check, close them out. And Grand Canyon was over helping on a lot of stuff on the perimeter, and Utah State was abusing that defense in the first half. The adjustments did come for Grand Canyon in the second, and credit to them for that. But Utah State, by the way they played smart on offense in the first half, set up the rest of the game and ultimately the win.